Hello and a very warm welcome back to the garden. It is a little bit damp. It does rain here in Wales. We just usually choose the days where it's dry. It's September, and so in this video I thought I'd share with you 14 crops that I sow every single September. It's not over yet. There's a lot of things that we can still grow, both outside and under cover. So the first crop to sow in September is kind of the last chance for your summer radishes outside, but you can also sow your winter radishes. In front of me here I have two different types. I've got daikon, which is one of my absolute favourites, and Spanish black round winter radish. Now I'm going to go through firstly a bunch of crops that you can sow outside. However, if there's any way that you can incorporate a low tunnel or a cold frame or even a fleece, and this is something you can put on at a later date, that's going to help extend and improve the amount of productivity that you get outside without having to invest in something like a polytunnel. Also, with the crops that are suitable, unlike say the daikon radish, you can start these in modules to then transplant outside here in September. These are spring onions, and these are spring onions ready for eating. You can sow them directly or in modules, and they're just such a lovely flavour. They're really nice and productive. Even if they are quite small, you can still use them. That's one of the things that I love about them. And their leaves I always use them as like a nice garnish for any dinner that I make at home. Early September is also the perfect time to sow a lot of your Oriental greens. So we've got pak choi, which is growing here, tatsoi, mitsuna, mabuna, komatsuna, all of these different things. They are so tasty and they grow so well. When you start them off in say early summer, they often tend to bolt or run to seed. However, if you start them off at this time of year, they grow really fast. They love these conditions, and they're something that you can enjoy later on in autumn. So I'm going to do three crops in one. First off is mustards. I've got mustards growing here. These add such a nice flavour of heat and warmth. They grow so fast. There's so many different varieties as well. You can get like red ones, purple ones, green ones. And I will also include cover crops. So here I've got some, a strawberry. Here I've got some perennials growing. But where I haven't got perennials growing, I'm trying to protect the soil over winter. And so cover crops like mustard, phacelia, vetch, field peas and field beans are all suitable to sow in September. Okay. That's so good. Now, field beans are really hardy at overwintering. Last September, we sowed some as a cover crop, and they ended up growing to like 2.5 meters high, and we harvested a huge amount the following May and June. So you can actually grow them as a crop instead of a cover crop, and now is the time to sow it. So if you've got any openings in your garden, sow some field beans and enjoy those as a lovely crop next year during the hungry gap. Another lovely crop to sow in September for growing outside, that again you can start off in modules, all of these are going to be going outside, is rocket. Rocket is absolutely delicious, and it is less likely to run to seed when you sow it this late in the season, which is great because you can enjoy more of the green leaves. However, all of the beautiful flowers are also edible, so can't really complain too much. We're now transitioning into things to grow under cover, but again, if you don't have a polytunnel, that can include cold frames and hoop houses or low tunnels. So spinach, this variety here is Giant Winter. It's very nice and hardy, so I can sow it outside, but also grow really well overwintered in a polytunnel. And so everything that I mentioned already for growing outdoors, you can put in a polytunnel, plant under your tomato plants, but spinach is kind of a transition, and now we're going to cover a bunch of crops to grow under cover over winter. So lettuce, especially winter varieties of lettuce, is such a fun thing to grow under cover over winter. One of my suggestions, if you have limited space, is you can either use mushroom crates or you can use bigger pots, bigger than this, to sow them and just grow them in a container over winter. One of the most important things to understand when growing under cover during winter is that evaporation is much lower, and you don't want to overwater your plants, otherwise it can cause them to be moldy just because of far less sunlight and heat. So be very cautious when watering any of your crops over winter. But yeah, lettuce, having access to these fresh, crunchy, leafy greens over winter is always a nice blessing. So kind of coming to the end of the pea season outside. Always so good. Growing peas for shoots undercover always works nicely, because when you're growing peas for shoots, you just continue harvesting the shoots, and you can go all winter long enjoying peas for shoots. And then when the temperatures start to rise again in late winter and the light levels as well into early spring, you can let the peas then grow all of their way to produce a really nice early set of pea pods to then enjoy during the hungry gap before the tomatoes take over your polytunnel. Starting kale off in a polytunnel and growing it over winter is a really nice way to get some more crunchy green leaves. One of my favourite snacks, of course, is just basic kale chips, but putting different seasonings on top. It's kind of a nice winter warmer and a nice thing to do around Christmas when you have guests over. Sticking to the theme of brassicas, here are some nice Savoy winter cabbages that are coming along. So it's a little bit late, I think, especially kind of zone 7, zone 8 to start off spring cabbages to then plant outside. You can try it, it probably will work a little bit, but if you start them off in a polytunnel and then plant them out, that's a really nice way to enjoy a good cabbage flavour over winter and into early spring. And they're just going to come on so much faster than if they were overwintering outside without that protection. It's amazing what just a little bit of plastic can do in terms of extending the season and greatly improving the rate of growth, which is something that is very precious during the off season because there's very little growth outside. A couple of really nice things to also grow is going to be Napa cabbage, or Chinese cabbage, and coriander. Coriander is so hardy at overwintering in a polytunnel, and that is exactly where these are going to go. And I just seen that there's a self-seeded tomato in there. Wonder where that came from. If you want a bit of a challenge, you can join me. I'm trying a new variety from Real Seeds called Wawa Kai Choi stem vegetable, which is kind of, if you know the screaming mandrakes on Harry Potter, it's a vegetable that looks closest to that in real life. And apparently it's really quite hard to get right, and September is the best time to sow it. So join me and let's see what happens next year.